So now we have had a slight change in the program in that we're still having the navigating the recent changes to the NDIS system in 2025. And Michael Hampton, the Community Voice Manager for Synapse, was going to give this presentation, but now our lovely Michelle Sharkey is morphed into another male today, and she is going to give that presentation for us.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and I am going to be talking to you this afternoon about the changes to the NDIS. So I am presenting on behalf of Michael, who really does apologise he's not able to be here today. He has indicated to me, though, that he will be coming along to do a topical Tuesday for us in November, and he is much more knowledgeable on this topic than I am. We're going to talk about the NDIS post-October 2024, when the changes to the Act came in. We're going to look at why the changes, what are the changes, and how the changes are going to affect the participants on a day-to-day basis. So yes, the NDIS is changing, and you know when governments change things, it's not always in the interest of the participant that that occurs. Generally, it's more in the interest of government that that occurs. So the changes in terms of why they're changing it is because they aim to make the system fairer. Oops, we're going nowhere fast here, are we not? Okay. Okay. We aim to make the system fairer, more transparent and sustainable. And I think that sustainable is the main one, because really the NDIS has been a much larger impost on the public purse than they expected it to be. They're going to do that by improving pricing, clarifying what supports are covered, and developing a new planning framework for more flexible and individualised plans. Now, the key reasons why these are occurring is to address the NDIS cost blowout, ensuring fairer use of taxpayers' money, and providing clearer guidelines on what the NDIS supports can fund. That means there will be some things that they won't be funding, and preparing for the future of NDIS. And that really is about making it much more sustainable. It's also trying to put in place, I guess, a much more in-depth system where they can monitor the plans of individuals and to make sure individuals are not taken advantage of. So what are those changes? So there's a new definition of NDIS supports, replacement supports, and previously approved supports. NDIS's funder payment periods have been introduced, and NDIS impairment notices are occurring, and there are new payment schedules. Okay, Section 10, you can see this has been written by a lawyer, not me. Section 10 of the NDIS Act defines what constitutes an NDIS support, which are the supports that can be funded by providers or by the NDIS. The recent legislation changes effective from October 2024 introduced a new definition for NDIS supports, moving away from the previous reasonable and necessary support test criteria, and it now requires the minister to be satisfied that the support is appropriately funded by NDIS. And when I talk about the minister or the CEO, it basically means or the person acting as their agent, which is your NDIS plan manager. Okay. Nope. Okay. It introduces Section 10 of the Act, introduces a definition of NDIS supports that can be funded by NDIS and declared by NDIS rules to be, NDIS supports. So they've now got what is called an in and an out. So what's in, what's out. So there's a link at the bottom of there, which is you can go onto their website and have a look at, and that will give you a list of things of what you can now get supports under NDIS and what you can't. And the replacement rule will enable participants to request a replacement support that maybe is not included on the current new support list, but that as yet as I understand in chatting with Michael yesterday, has yet to be tested. Okay. So under the NDIS section 32L, there's new planning frameworks, and participants will undergo a needs assessment which records their whole of person disability support needs. And the NDIS will fund needs which arise from the impairments in relation to which a participant meets the disability requirements and or the early intervention requirements under the NDIS Act of 2013. So the CEO, or their agent, must arrange for an assessment of a participant's disability support and to be undertaken as soon as practicable after they've been requested to provide a plan. So the other thing that's changed is that the funding periods have changed. So plans approved after the law comes into effect on the 3rd of October 2024 will have total funding amounts, and that's the funding component amounts and the funding periods, okay? This clarifies that the total amounts of the funds available in the plan and how long the funds need to last. So you'll be given a plan with a total amount, and your plan may be for 1 year or it may be for 2 years, almost up to 5. But what they will give you is a total amount of that plan. So how then do they ensure that you're going to basically use that money wisely? So now what they've done is they've introduced planning periods. And they're a new way the NDIS releases the plan budgets in stages rather than all at once. So prior to 2024, you would get your whole 12 months, but now it's coming out in basically in funding periods or bits and pieces of the year. So a funding period is a set time frame within your total plan period. It will usually be 3 months, but that may vary according to your plan. Each period allows access to a portion of your total plan budget. You can only spend the money from the current or previous plans. So yes, you can carry money over from a previous period, and that can then go into the next period, but you can't carry that money over from one plan to the other. Okay, and this applies not only to new plans that have been undertaken since 2024, but any of you who have undergone a reassessed plan, which they are undertaking, I think, quite generally at the moment. Okay. So managing funding across different periods. The funding period model is designed to support steady use of supports across your plan. There are rules about how and when you can use your funding. The unused funds at the end of the funding period will roll over to the next, but funds not spent at the end of your plan will not carry over. And the other thing is you can't access money from a future plan period. So if you were to use all your money within 2 months of that 3-month plan, period, sorry, you get the words mixed up. If you were to use money from the first 2 months, all your money in the first 2 months of your period, you will not be able to access money in the next period unless you get authorisation to do so. And can I say to you, that will be at the discretion of the planner, but what it won't mean is that you won't get more money in your plan. It'll come out of that funding period, which is the next period of time. So basically you have a finite amount of money to spend within a plan, and it's broken up into periods, and you can only use whatever they allocate you within that period to spend within that period. So section 34AA, it's a new addition to the Act. I'll bring it up now. Okay. And this is where life gets complicated for those of you who are on NDIS. So the support that is provided by NDIS is deemed necessary to address the needs of the participant arising from an impairment in relation to which the participant meets the disability requirements, or the early intervention requirements. So this relates to the introduction of impairments and impairment notices. As of today's date, they've not, Synapse are saying they haven't received any of these to really have a look at them, but they're basically assuming that they will come into effect over time. And as to stroke, this may have a profound effect because we know that the impairments that you get from a stroke can be multifactional. So your disability may be given as stroke, sorry. So each impairment, we believe, will need to meet the Section 24C criteria. So within a stroke, you may have more than one impairment, and if so, that needs to be noted on your disability notice that you receive, or sorry, your NDIS notice that you receive. But at this stage of the game, they're really struggling to be quite direct about that because they haven't got a clear understanding of how that's going to work. So just to remind you what 21241C is, it's up there for me, just in case any one of you were game enough to ask me a question. Basically, it's about how you get onto the plan, how you get onto an NDIS plan. So basically, it says that you have to have a significant disability diagnosis and it has to substantially reduce functional capacity in one or more of the 6 specified domains: communication, social interaction, learning, mobility, self-care, or self-management. And this means that the impairment significantly hinders the ability to perform tasks to these everyday activities, and this impact is often considered alongside the other criteria for NDIS eligibility. So, what does this mean? Basically, an impairment notice is now going to be the important document that you will receive. Okay, it replaces the current access, it's called current access decision letter, and existing participants will not change over until they receive a new NDIS plan. So when your plan is reviewed and you get a new plan, you will also receive an impairment notice. Now, is it important? And the answer is yes. Because basically what an impairment notice is, it defines what supports you can get through NDIS according to the impairment that your disability has basically identified. So with stroke, as I said earlier, that could be quite a number of different things. But basically any support you get will be directly linked to that decision, and your planner will use this information to help decide what supports you can get under your plan. And any supports purchased with NDIS funds must meet the updated definition of NDIS supports, and that is that what's in, what's out information, which is so critical for you to understand. The change recognises that people with the same diagnosis can have different support needs. So what does that mean? I'm just going to try and explain this to you as best I can. So under the NDIS, your disability may be seen as stroke. However, within the stroke definition, you may have various impairments, and it will be those impairments that are going to be identified on the impairment notice. So with a stroke, it may be that you have a physical impairment and that is identified on the notice. So any of the supports that you receive under the NDIS plan must relate to that impairment, not necessarily the overall diagnosis of the disability. So it's really important that you are very clear with your planner when you are talking to them how the stroke has affected you and what impairments that you are going to require to be within the domain of your plan, covered within the domain of the plan. So one or more categories may be listed, but if they're not listed, it's going to be very difficult for you to get supports without that being reviewed and included. So a participant or their nominee can apply to change their impairment category if it is incorrect or no longer applies. But again, Michael tells me that this is yet to be tested and they're not sure how that's going to go. However, they're basically expecting that if that does occur, that you will again be required to provide significant evidence to that. Okay. So just to recap on that. So instead of focusing on the disability diagnosis, it's going to be an impairment diagnosis. So even if further down the track from your stroke, you may develop some other, what they call impairments as a result of your stroke, you will need to have that impairment added to your impairment notice in order to get supports under the NDIS plan. I'll put that up there for us just to remind me to say it. So that impairment notice is really important when you get it. So once you get it, make sure you keep it, and because that will be your future reference for discussions with your NDIS planner. So again, the six disability impairments are intellectual, cognitive, neurological, sensory, physical, and psychosocial. And don't be shy about adding more than one of those to your disability impairment notice. Now, this is the other issue that's occurring with NDIS as we see it. So the other thing is that NDIS is becoming much less prepared to fund services or supports that they believe you can get from another organisation. And this is a really important one when we're looking at the whole stroke issue, because a lot of the health system, this is where health and disability interact. And it's going to be sometimes quite difficult to argue that the health cannot provide that. It has to be provided through the NDIS system. And there was also that issue going on with New South Wales Health and NDIS at the moment, whereby there's a bit toing and froing about what one is prepared to fund. And if you've got an NDIS plan and they're expecting that you would use your money, or health is expecting that you use your money from your NDIS plan to basically subsidise any health issues that you may have. It can also be an issue if you move into aged care. And what Michael explained to me about this is, so if you have had a stroke when you're younger and you're on an NDIS plan, but then you're over 65 and you go into hospital for some other condition, such as you have a fall and you have other disability or impairment resulting from that, NDIS are going to argue that that isn't something that NDIS should cover, that should be covered under the My Aged Care system. And can you imagine what that's going to be like long term? So again, it's those sort of things where there's going to be a lot of pushing and shoving until this is all made, it comes out at the end and we're clear about it. I won't cover education because that's mainly to do with children, so I'm not covering that. However, housing and supported independent living. What Michael was saying is there's now a really big push with NDIS to basically not necessarily support people living independently in their home, because even with significant disabilities prior to the change in the Act last year, they were able to provide a lot of supports within the home for people to live with high care needs in their own home. Now, this is starting to change from what Synapse is seeing. They're starting to ensure that people not only are looking to go into group homes, but move out of their independent housing and into supported independent and also supported independent living. So that's real push to save funds and move you into a much more economically viable process for them. Okay. Okay, we're not moving. Now we're moving. Okay, this concerns how the assessment is done. Okay. And the assessment will determine your supports. And again, it's basically the minister's role to determine whether or not every individual on NDIS has the required disability to be on it. So the process of the planning is part of the preparation of the participant's plan and resulting in report which informs the CEO about the participant's support needs. The planning process for you is a really essential part, okay? Make sure when you're going into having your planning meeting, even if it's a review, you have all your evidence with you. And if necessary, you do so that with a support person. So there's still the three main areas. There's the core, there's the capacity building, and there's the capital. And I haven't moved it across. So the core is for everyday activities and supports. The capacity building is for building skills and independence. And the capital is for one-off purchase. Now, what they're finding is that there's a real struggle now to be, when they're looking at replanning, to actually prove that you're requiring, particularly the area of capacity building. And the capacity building for us is the really important one because it gets you out and about and back into the community, okay? And that's the one that you really need to have your evidence for when you're having your plan reviewed. Why do you need a carer to take you to events like this? Why do you need somebody to come along with you and instead of going on your own? Why you can't use public transport? All of those things are important. Okay. The NDIA can consider changing your plan management type in certain circumstances, including if they think you, your nominee, your plan manager, or a child representative, that is somebody who's not a parent of the child, is unlikely to spend the NDIS funds properly relating to NDIS supports and in line with your plan. Now, one of the other things that is happening with NDIS and plan management is that you may receive a phone call from the NDIA planner or the NDIS planner, and they're going to ring up and say, have you got time for a chat? And your first question is going to be, is this a plan meeting? Okay? Because often when we get a phone call from anybody and they just ring up and have a chat, we think that's just having a chat. But what we've found at the association and what Synapse have found is that within days, people are getting a letter where their plan has been reviewed and changed. So the first question you ask is this a planning meeting? Is this a review of my plan? The second thing you say is, if they say, yes, it is, you say, well, I need somebody with me. I need to get my papers together. Can you either call back at another time or preferably, can I make a time to meet with you? And never can I say, I don't care who we are, go into a planning meeting with somebody who's your planning manager and organising how much money you get on your own. You always take somebody with you because often we hear different things or we don't process things properly or we think they're being nice when they're not, okay? Okay. So there is some good news, believe it or not. It means that they can vary your plan by just having a chat. And that can be the duration of the plan, so they can extend the plan that you've already got. Or they can respond to a significant change in your plan. So if your health circumstances were to change or if your physical circumstances were to change, you can have a chat with your plan manager and that may be able to get a change of circumstances form filled out and basically you may get more money or they may give you more supports. And you may be able to make minor variations that result in increased to the funding of the supports under the participation plan. Okay? Okay. So under section 32L, they haven't basically seen any major concerns coming through with the assessments to this date, and they anticipate that it could be both, okay? So it could be an area of concern. There may be some areas where plans are being quite deliberately changed and people are losing out, and we need to be very vigilant of that. And then there is an area of promise. So if it's done well, it will enable us to encompass those with many impairments that increase total function impairment. So that means that you may be able to consider more impairments under the one plan. But again, none of that's going to happen without chatting to them. Okay, another area of concern in plan management is there's been a pushback from the plan managers unless the support is specifically named in the plan. And that can be your consumables, your assistive technology, your capacity building part of your plan, and also your supports, which is why the what's in, what's out is so important to know. So they are changing what supports you can get. And my understanding is that if you were able to argue to get a piece of technology that is no longer included in the support list now, prior, then you may be able to get that replaced. However, if it's not in there now and you suddenly realise it would be of benefit for you in terms of managing your impairment, you're going to have to argue very strongly, particularly if it's not in the what's in. So you're not going to get the new Apple Watch, which I have to say to you looked magnificent on the TV last night. You're not going to have that basically covered by NDIS. There's a lot of pushback on those sort of things. Okay. So what do you do if you're not happy with what is going on with your NDIS plan? It's quite important that you know your rights within the NDIS. Synapse provides excellent services to assist you to move through that process, as does Physical Disability Council of New South Wales. And they have people who can basically review the process with you and ensure that it's been done correctly. And if it hasn't been done correctly, Synapse have the staffing level to be able to take that matter through to the tribunal with you and argue why that should change. Okay? And so this is the Reviews and Appeals Tribunal that is available through NDIS if you're not happy with what you've received. Okay? One of our other members who did get one of those lovely phone calls asking him to have a chat, and then found out 3 days later that they'd reviewed the plan totally and removed quite a number of significant important things they needed in order to continue living independently at home, took matters into his own hands and wrote directly to the minister, and things started to happen very quickly. Those are the sorts of things that you really do need to be on top of. Watch what you're receiving, read it when it comes out, and be very clear on what it is you're getting. Now, I'm saying that in relation to both NDIS and My Aged Care. Often it is a lot of basically administrative gobbledygook, but the detail is really important. And if you can't understand it, find one of your children or somebody within the neighbourhood who can assist you to work it out. Okay. So summary. The key changes. So the introduction of the funding period, I actually like that, can I say? I think that's an important thing for our members to have, because it means that the control of money is much more focused, and NDIS can have an oversight of that. They can watch and see whether or not there are some providers who may not be acting in your best interest out there, who are wanting to use up all your money in that first 6 months and expect NDIS to come to the party after that. So that's, I think, an improvement for us. It also helps us budget, and it can help us plan. A change in therapy funding from July 25, requiring therapy to be claimed only under the capacity building budget instead of the core budget. And that's not one that's necessarily in our interest, can I say to you? And I guess one of the other issues for that is they're also looking at and reducing particularly the amount of allied health therapies that we require. So make sure you're very on top of what it is they're allocating you under your capacity building, for those things. It's no longer in your core, it's in your capacity, and make sure you're clear on what that is. The new impairment notice, keep within your really important documents, with your birth certificate, all of those sort of things, because as time goes on, that's the document that you're going to be able to use to argue for and against if your impairments change. It's going to identify what impairments you can claim supports for, and it will explain to you why they're not giving you other supports you may need. It's also updated the price limits, and I understand it's reduced the amount of money that physiotherapists can claim, and there's a bit of pushback with that. It's also reduced the amount of music therapy that members are allowed to claim, and for us with our choirs, that's been a significant thing, and we put in some advocacy work on that with the Music Therapy Association. The other changes involves the launch of the Thriving Kids and the Early Intervention Pathway. And that's basically where they've hived away all the kids under the age of 9 into a new program called the Thriving Kids. What is it? Nobody knows. Okay, nobody knew about it. Nobody knew about the announcement prior to it happening. And every organisation that we work with under the Disability Advocacy Futures program was as surprised about it as the others. It's one of those things that somebody described to me as the plane has taken off and we're building the plane as we go. Wouldn't we all want to be on that plane? So that's basically Michael's talk for today, and I hope I haven't confused you